All right, everyone, welcome back for the episode of Carnivore Trades. Today is Thursday, August 24th, 2023. If you've not done so already, please give the video a thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Come find me on carnivoretrades.com for swing trading alerts and analysis. Anyways, let's get into it today here. So a little bit of a sell-off on our hands. So markets here down about 1%, at least on the spiders there. Triple Q is taking the worst of it, down a little over 1.5% on the day. Apple kind of leading to the downside there, down 2%. Russell and the Dow also in some pretty rough shape there, which we'll get into in a few minutes. And this is something we talked about yesterday. It's something I harp on a lot, especially with 0DTE. These big moves, they look sexy, but you don't build any support and you can just slice it right back down. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. We had a little gap, euphoria off of the Nvidia earnings, and it looks like a buy the rumor, sell the news there for Nvidia. Of course, having a smash blowout quarter, it's been beaten with a dead horse has been beaten up right now as far as that's concerned here. But we are seeing some distribution coming into the play here. We had 64 million shares in the first hour traded here on Nvidia, and then now we're kind of floating back up as you're seeing kind of like what looks to me like retail and algos trying to buy this dip here. This has got to close above 480 here, otherwise it's a little bit of a red flag and it may start to come back in again. So there's your pivot high, 480.88, and then there's the gap up the other day, 481.87. So I'd really like to see this hold that area. If this starts to come down again, it's going to take the whole market with it, and that's really the danger here of having these high concentration in. And this was up 10% at one point. It's only up 1%, but having a high concentration, these markets indexes having such a weighting here with Nvidia, Apple, so on and so forth here. They can take it up, but they can also take it right back down, and seeing some good distribution come into play here. So watch that level by the end of the day for we're below it right now. So that could cause a little bit of selling. As far as the markets though, outside of that, I said this morning, a little bit of a risk off, like almost a traditional risk off look. So take a look at, ZB, we talk about yields all the time, but 30-year bond note, getting a little bit of a bid this morning. It is going into that 20 moving average, but this isn't a clear rejection. It's actually holding up just fine right now. So as you may prefer TLT, same thing essentially, hanging in there. And what I noticed about the gap up this morning is obviously Nvidia doing a lot of it, and you see the spiders there. We'll talk about that daily in a second. But XLP, that was getting a pretty good bid this morning, did roll back to negative, but XLU again rolled back to negative. But we were seeing that kind of bid early on, almost a traditional kind of risk off sense. Speaking of rolling negative, XLF here, that is, okay, it's up 2 cents now, but again, look where it back tested, 50-day moving average and that weekly resistance level. So, but it was this morning a little bit more of a traditional risk off look. Again, we've talked about this with bonds going into that double bottom there on the TLT, getting a pop off of that, and in front of a volatility event too. So I think risk for bonds here is to the upside, at least in the short term. I think, that doesn't change my bigger picture view on the bond market, but right now does look like a little bit of a traditional kind of risk off day there. But again, with the spiders, we went up on no support, and we can go right down on no support. Where did we stop? 50 MA, 20 MA necktie. What's the target been? What have I been telling the target's going to be for the last week? Right there, and there's our trend line there. I really like the look here on the futures as well. Take a look at that. The ES perfectly tagging that 20 and 50 moving average there, as well as this upsloping trend line. So that's for right now, that's a rejection. So bulls, you need to put in a higher low here at some point tomorrow, and then you can come back up here and test 4,500 again there on the ES, or 445, right? 445, 446, today's high 445.22. Those of you who follow the SPX, it's like 44.60, 44.70. But right now, pretty good rejection here. The Qs went red first before everything else. And well, actually say the Russell was, which we'll talk about in a second, down 1.7. That's an engulfing candle. I mean, there's pretty good bear control here so far. And, for bears, I would have preferred I would have preferred kind of more of a pump today, if anything, because this makes it kind of more of a wild card now. But right now, bears are in control here. And I think the Qs at least want this trend line here. And you're starting to see that 100 moving average start to flatten out. It's getting close to that area. That's where I think it wants to go. So, and you have some support there. We did get kind of close to it, so you might overshoot a little bit. If we look over at the spiders here, again, respective 100-day moving averages right there as well. There's a white trend line there, and that is that pivot high from last August, literally, almost exactly a year ago, just past a year ago, which we did get close to last week. But, we bounced. So if we do come down, I think you'll probably overshoot, maybe even into 427. But again, right now, bulls, what they need to see is a higher low here. So you want kind of a knee-jerk down on Jackson Hole, and then you want to put in a higher low. That can get you up into the 450 area, maybe even 453. If you don't do that, then there's problems, with this market here. And we're seeing problems right now. We'll get into our sectors here, but let's start with the Russell. So that is, that's a daily bear flag. There's really no other way around it. We did have that zigzag attempt yesterday, and we had a push this morning, big power candle, 10-minute candle right before 10 o'clock, and then we rolled right over here. Take a look at the Dow via the DIA, 50 MA test, and a move lower. We took out all the lows from last week, and that's a daily bear pattern there. So again, you still have your holding the moving averages for now, but you wanted to see 343 hold, right? This is that pivot, and weekly, from a weekly chart perspective, that's your if this is a bull case, this should be your inverse head and shoulders. You don't want to close below that area or that 20-week moving average. So again, something to watch there. Speaking of weekly, spiders here too. You don't want to close in this area. Like if you get close to the 20 moving average on any chart, it should be, if it's strong, it should be fuel for a move, right? So the fact that we kind of popped, essentially like kissed it, and then popped off of it, tested this trend line and came back, it's not a good sign. So tomorrow's close will tell us a lot more, obviously. It's basically the Super Bowl starting at 10:05 tomorrow, but just some levels there, obviously, to watch. But Dow and the Russell showing leadership to the downside with those weak candles there on the daily. SMH, so we got to talk about the semis. This is a day where Nvidia gapped up 10%. So I got the context here is very important. And we're down 2.25 on the SMH. That's not good. We went back up here, tested the 155, 156 area. Total gap and crap, right? So back below the moving averages, back below 150. Not a good chart there. So you can't hold those gains. It's not a good sign. Take a look at some of these other semis. AMD, outside move down, wiped out a whole week's worth of trading. AMAT, green to red day. ADI, green to red. Texas Instruments, green to red. TSM, green to red, engulfing candle. Intel, didn't even gap up. So semi is definitely on the weaker side here, and that's not a good sign for technology, not a good sign for the market, as you know. If we do type the symbol in right, if we do get down here and continue further, we'll look for this trend line right here, maybe even a pierce of 140. If you get through that, there's a gap that's just sitting there waiting to get filled on the daily. And that is the Nvidia gap too. So I think ultimately that wants to go down there at some point. By the way, monthly pattern, we don't look at this all that often, but you can make a case you're starting to put in an M pattern on the monthly. So just, be aware of that. We'll watch the monthly close too, but something to keep an eye on. Cloud software got to our trend line. So gap up, gap and crap like everything else. Engulfing, gap and crap, hit the trend line. What more can you say? Back below the 50 and 20. And again, this is kind of what this means when we close below these inside bar levels. It means that the next rally is likely to fail. And so far, it's been a failure here. We'll see again. Weekly close will tell us a lot more, but cloud coming back in and a pretty sharp reversal there, down almost 2% on the day. Transports here, actually hanging in there okay, but again, just like the Dow and the Russell daily chart, that's a bear flag now. So you got 5 candles there. That's enough to call it. I said yesterday it was immature, but now it's starting to mature here. So any more consolidation here, and this can break that area. If we do, probably got to go down and test. There will be a support at this pivot at 15,250, but I think, that breakout area right there, little gap, 100 MA. So just below 15,000, I think that's kind of your next big level. But again, there will be some support at this gap here. Definitely can't say there won't be. But transports, again, bear flagging and not a good sign. Interest rates here, so via the 2-year, first as always, again, holding trend. So short end of the curve is still very strong. Up moving to double top, and that's actually the 30-year, sorry. There's the 2-year, but the 30-year still is holding trend for now. 2-year, got a cup and handle look. 5-year, again, same kind of thing. 5.33 is the big area to watch on the 2-year, and then there's the 10-year. This is still holding trend, obviously, like I just said, as is the 30-year, but I think currently, at least for right now, I think risk looks like it's to the downside on yields. So on bonds, risk the upside, specifically more so at the long end of the curve. So not so much at the short end. I think the short end looks a lot more like it can break out. 2 and 5 looks pretty good, but 10s and 30s into that double top still. So I do think it needs to do a little bit more backing and filling there. All right, anyways, over to XHB. So starting off with housing here, down 1% on the day, rejecting that little area. So we watched that yesterday, and that is, that previous pivot high, which we broke above. Now we're back below. So watch that there, 50 MA. This could turn into a bear flag too. That's starting to set up as well with that rejection. So this can start to head lower. If you take out this pivot here and the support level at 77.50, we can get down to 74 bucks. Trend line, pivot high, that's probably where it wants to go there. So watch XHB here. It's been a really stubbornly strong sector, as has ITB, but everything has its day. ITB down 65 cents here again. Bear flag pattern on the daily. You get through that 100, you'll have a little bit of support at 77.50, but really a bigger level I think is right around 75, 74.50 there. But again, housing starting to crack a little bit. VNQ had a nice rally, and that's, believe it or not, outside of the last week, this week alone, it's actually been kind of strong. Only down 6 cents in a market that's getting hit pretty hard here. And basically just at the flat line. But essentially we went up and tested that 20 moving average, pulling back there. Not doing anything with this currently. If we got down here, in the next week or so, I'd say an aggressive play, you could take that, a pierce of that trend line there. But that's really all I have it for it at the moment. Still needs to get through 83, still has a lot of work to do. XLF we talked about. It's a miracle this thing is even green right now. But it did test that resistance area, was support, now is resistance, and it came back in. So financials coming in, KRE up 32 cents here. Again, still showing strength in a weak tape. But again, came up here, we retested that area, retested the 50, and now we're below it. So watch that weekly close on these will be very important. Same thing with the KBE. And then broker dealers here, going up to our 20 moving average, testing this trend line again, and 500. That continues to be resistance right now. I'm not sure what this wants to do. If this can flag, then it can go higher. But if we start to come back in, then you're going to need to put in a higher low, much like the spiders there. And then you could go higher. But if you take this pivot out, probably down to about that 470 area. All right, over to commodities here, starting off with crude as always. Up 17 cents, nothing terrible here. Crude's just hanging in there. We effectively back tested this trend line right now. Doesn't mean we can't head a little bit lower there. I would say one more pierce of this trend line here. If we do get down to, there is some support around 74, 75. If we violate this trend line one more time, I'm probably just going to erase it. So just be aware of that. I mean, we've hit it so many times and traded through it so many times. But right now, we're getting a little bit of bid off of that. There's some support here. There's some support around 74.25, 74.50. But really, big picture, it's just weekly consolidation, which is not bearish. And crude's hanging in there. So we'll leave it at that. XLE down just 21 cents. Again, was green earlier and tested that 20 DMA on the daily. And look on the intraday, it's still pretty strong, right? So this is still a sector that's outperforming on a relative basis, right? Markets are getting pounded, and XLE down just 23 cents. Nothing terrible there. XOP, same thing. OIH, same thing. These are just putting in weekly, daily consolidation for a move higher from what I can see. Nat gas finally finding its footing here. Was lower earlier. Very, very, very weak inventory build here. Came in way lower than expected. So market was mispriced there. But bottom line, we went into support. We went into the trend line there. That told you, regardless of what the number was going to be, we were likely to get a positive reaction here. You also got the 100-day moving average there being tested, and nat gas getting a bit off that. Next level to really get above is 267. If you can get above 267, then we can go back up to, 280, 285. And then obviously if you get through that, it's really $3 is the big one. That's where you could see a much, much bigger move in Natty, but Natty's still holding that uptrend right now. And, good inventory number today. So we'll see what that gives us tomorrow. Again, rig count has been falling there in both oil and gas. So that will be something to watch tomorrow at 1 o'clock. All right, dollar index here. It won't go down, right? So dollar just continuing to push higher. And what's interesting is you're seeing gold is flat to positive, and bond yields, again, I talked about this earlier, bonds are not like, they're down a little bit, but they're not like getting smoked. And that's with the dollar up, 61 cents. That's just a big move for the dollar. Weekly close tomorrow will be very important. You guys know I've harped on it, 103.75.6. So a close above that is not good for markets. You could see a serious squeeze in the dollar if that happens. First big level would be, really 106. I would say that's your big pivot there. I don't know if that happens. Usually the third hit of a trend line gets defended, but you're consolidating here, and I don't see any problems. Maybe Jerome Powell says something tomorrow that reverses that, but for right now, face value, pattern's good, and there's no problems with the dollar right now, especially if we close above this white trend line tomorrow. We can squeeze very hard on the DXY. Gold here. So again, okay, I said flat to positive, but there's the GLD, it's basically positive. But in any case, stalling out at the 50 and 20. Let's not make too much out of it. It's trying to hold the 200 right now. We need to get a little bit more than that for gold here. You need to get back above these moving averages. You got to put in a higher low or flag or something like that. So if you lose 1900, it's down to 1850 to 1830. But right now, just hanging in there and kind of going sideways. Nothing going on. Silver, we said 2450 would be resistance. We're pulling back a little bit. Nothing crazy. It's down 89 basis points. We'll see what kind of pattern that puts in. Again, that will be moved tomorrow by the Jackson Hole Conference. Platinum up 50 basis points. Nothing terrible there. We'll see it. That may want to retest 960. If you get through that, then you can get back up to about 990. But again, I'm still looking for one more move lower there. Palladium also looking for another move lower, and copper rejecting 380. So we'll see how that trades. This needs to put in a higher low here in the near term. All right, and then Bitcoin lastly, just kind of sideways, nothing really going on. Still think this can get a little bit more of a bounce here. Still very oversold, but I mean, this could just barcode for a while, so just be aware of that. But this should get some type of counter trend bounce here at some point. Maybe it gets moved tomorrow on Jackson Hole, but again, nothing really doing there. You don't want to see this consolidate for too long, because then it's going to break this pivot, and then you're going down to 22,000 on BTC. All right, lastly here, let's wrap up. So Spider's down 1%. Looks like we're at the lows of the day. Yeah, we should close right around 4,400, I would think. We're about 10 points away from that right now. So we'll see if the 0DT Gamma boys show up here at the last second. Got about 22 minutes left in the day. So we'll see if they save that. Watch that level on Nvidia. Below 480, that's kind of a red flag for bulls there. And I definitely saw some institutional distribution this morning. And I know that the institutions weren't buying this dip. They were upgrading it, but they were upgrading it to sell into most likely. But in any case here, we'll see what we get tomorrow, 10:05. But right now, we got a rejection at face value, 50, 20, trend line, engulfing reversal, weakness in tech and semiconductors specifically. So again, we'll see what we get tomorrow, but those are the levels we're watching. Anyways, guys, going to wrap up here. You guys take care. Come find me on carnivoretrades.com. Talk to you guys all tomorrow.